Hi, welcome to my channel. Let me take you straight to what dark psychology is all about, without wasting your time. Dark psychology is not about evil people. It is about honest human behavior. It is about the thoughts we don't say out loud, the impulses we pretend we don't have, the motives we hide even from ourselves. Most people want to believe the mind is logical, fair, and moral, that we make decisions based on reason, that we treat others with intention and clarity. But that belief exists to keep us comfortable, not accurate. Because beneath manners, rules, and social norms, the human mind operates on power, fear, desire, and survival. Dark psychology begins when you stop asking how people should behave and start observing how they actually behave. People don't act based on truth. They act based on perception. They don't follow facts. They follow feelings. And most of the time, those feelings are driven by insecurity. One of the first principles of dark psychology is this: the mind will protect its identity at all costs, even if that identity is false, even if it is harmful, even if it causes suffering. This is why people defend lies longer than they defend the truth, because admitting the truth would destroy the version of themselves they've invested in. Ego is not confidence. Ego is fragile identity, and fragile identity demands control. People seek control in subtle ways, not always through dominance, sometimes through silence, through guilt, through emotional withdrawal. Some people don't raise their voice to gain power. They remove affection. They don't argue. They disappear. This creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates anxiety. An anxious mind is easier to influence. Dark psychology understands that control doesn't come from force. It comes from emotional imbalance. The person who cares less holds more power. This is why indifference can feel crueler than anger. Anger still shows investment. Indifference communicates disposability. The human brain is wired to fear rejection more than failure, because rejection threatens belonging, and belonging is survival. That's why people tolerate disrespect longer than loneliness, why they stay in unhealthy relationships, why they compromise their boundaries to avoid abandonment. Dark psychology exploits this fear. It uses validation as a weapon. Approval becomes currency. Attention becomes leverage. Affection becomes conditional. When validation is unpredictable, the brain becomes addicted, not to the person, but to the possibility of approval. This is the same mechanism behind gambling addiction: intermittent reward. Sometimes you're valued, sometimes you're ignored. Your brain keeps chasing the next hit. Dark psychology isn't always intentional. Many people manipulate without realizing it, because manipulation is learned behavior. Children learn early that crying gets attention, that silence gets noticed, that compliance earns praise. These strategies don't disappear in adulthood. They evolve. Some adults manipulate by playing the victim, some by appearing helpless, some by overgiving, then demanding loyalty in return. Generosity can be a tool of control when it comes with expectation. Dark psychology teaches this uncomfortable truth. Not all kindness is pure. Some kindness is transactional. Some support is strategic. Some help is given to create obligation. And obligation creates power imbalance. People rarely say what they want directly. They create situations where you feel forced to give it. Guilt is one of the most powerful psychological tools because it turns internal. No threat is needed. You punish yourself. The mind would rather feel guilty than rejected, so it complies. Fear also plays a role, but not all with obvious fear. Sometimes fear hides behind respect, behind tradition, behind authority. People obey titles more than truth, uniforms more than ethics, confidence more than competence. The brain shortcuts logic when authority is present. This is why tone often matters more than content. Why people believe confident lies over uncertain truths. Certainty feels safe, even when it's wrong. Dark psychology understands that repetition creates reality. Say something often enough, and the brain stops questioning it. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Familiarity reduces mental effort, and the brain prefers comfort over accuracy. This is how narratives are built, how reputations are shaped, how beliefs are installed. Most people think manipulation requires intelligence. It doesn't. It requires awareness of emotional patterns. People respond predictably when their identity is threatened, when their status is questioned, when their self-image is challenged. Insult someone's intelligence subtly, and they will try to prove you wrong. Question their value, and they will overextend themselves. Dark psychology doesn't attack directly. It nudges. It plants doubt. It lets the mind do the damage. Silence is also a psychological weapon, not peaceful silence, strategic silence. When someone withholds response, the other person fills the gap with assumptions, usually negative ones. The brain hates uncertainty, so it creates explanations, often blaming itself. This is why ghosting hurts, why unanswered messages create anxiety, why lack of closure feels worse than rejection. The mind wants an ending, and when it doesn't get one, it loops. Dark psychology knows that people remember emotional experiences more than facts. You won't remember everything someone said, but you will remember how they made you feel, especially if they made you feel small, invisible, or replaceable. Humans are not traumatized by events alone. They are traumatized by powerlessness. When you feel you have no control, the mind fractures. This is why unpredictability is destabilizing, why unstable environments create hyper-awareness, why people become obsessed with reading moods. Dark psychology uses unpredictability to maintain dominance, rules that change, affection that fluctuates, standards that shift. The goal is not clarity, it is dependency. When someone becomes the source of both comfort and discomfort, the bond strengthens, not healthily, but powerfully. This is known as trauma bonding. The brain associates relief with the same source that caused pain, and escaping feels like losing oxygen. Dark psychology doesn't mean everyone is malicious. It means everyone has the capacity to protect themselves at the expense of others. Morality often bends under threat. People justify actions that benefit them, rewriting memories, altering narratives, shifting blame. The mind hates seeing itself as the villain, so it creates stories where it is always reasonable. This is why accountability feels rare, why apologies are conditional, why responsibility is diluted. Dark psychology is about understanding, not imitation. Because once you see the patterns, they lose power. You stop personalizing behavior that was never about you. You stop chasing validation from emotionally unavailable people. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Awareness is protection. When you understand that most behavior is driven by fear, ego, and insecurity, manipulation becomes visible. You notice when affection is used as leverage, when silence is used as punishment, when generosity demands repayment. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy, control with care, attachment with love. The darkest truth of psychology is not that people manipulate. It's that manipulation works best on those who want to be chosen, those who fear being alone, those who doubt their worth, those who crave approval. The strongest defense is not strength, it is clarity. Knowing your boundaries, knowing your values, knowing when something feels wrong even if it looks right. Dark psychology loses power when you stop needing permission to exist. When you no longer trade authenticity for acceptance. The mind is powerful, but awareness is stronger. And once you see clearly, you cannot be controlled the same way again. There is a version of human behavior that only appears when no one is watching. Not the version people present. Not the version shaped by rules, religion, or reputation, but the version driven by instinct. This is where dark psychology truly begins. Most people believe they are good, but goodness is often conditional. Remove consequences, and behavior changes. Remove accountability, and morals bend. Remove witnesses, and restraint disappears. The mind is not guided by ethics first. It is guided by survival. Dark psychology understands this truth. People don't abandon values suddenly. They justify abandoning them. The human mind is a master of rationalization. It doesn't ask, "Is this right?" It asks, "How do I explain this to myself?" This is why people hurt others without seeing themselves as cruel. Why betrayal feels justified. Why manipulation feels necessary. The mind rewrites reality to protect self-image. One of the darkest mechanisms in psychology is moral licensing. When people do something good, they subconsciously give themselves permission to do something bad later. Kindness becomes a credit system. I've done enough. I deserve this. I've earned the right. This is why people who see themselves as moral are sometimes the most dangerous. They don't question themselves. They excuse themselves. Power amplifies this effect. The more power someone has, the less empathy they naturally feel. Not because they are evil, but because power removes dependence. When you don't need others, you stop sensing them. Power creates psychological distance. Distance reduces guilt. This is why authority figures justify harm easily. Why leaders sleep peacefully after destructive decisions. Why cruelty often hides behind policy, rules, or procedure. Dark psychology reveals something disturbing. Empathy is strongest when people feel equal. It fades when hierarchy appears. Status changes perception. People treat those below them as objects, tools, resources, and they treat those above them with obedience, even when it contradicts their values. Most people don't rebel against injustice. They adapt to it, because belonging feels safer than resistance. Another dark truth. People fear exclusion more than they fear being wrong. So they agree publicly with things they privately question. They laugh at jokes they dislike. They stay silent when they should speak. Silence becomes complicity, and the mind calls it keeping the peace. Dark psychology explains how people are conditioned to betray themselves. It starts small. Ignore discomfort. Suppress intuition. Accept what feels wrong to avoid conflict. Over time, this becomes identity. People forget who they were before adaptation. Manipulation works best on those disconnected from their instincts. Those taught to be agreeable. Those rewarded for compliance. Those punished for saying no. The darker side of psychology understands this. Control is easier when someone doubts their own perception. This is why gaslighting is so destructive. It doesn't attack reality directly. It attacks confidence in reality. When someone says, "You're overreacting," "You're imagining things," that didn't happen like that. They are not correcting you. They are destabilizing you. Once you doubt yourself, you rely on them. Dependency is the goal. Another unsettling truth. People are more influenced by fear of loss than desire for gain. You can motivate someone faster by threatening removal than promising reward. Take away attention. Take away security. Take away approval. The brain panics. Dark psychology uses this instinct relentlessly. Affection is given, then withdrawn. Closeness is offered, then removed. Safety is implied, then threatened. This keeps the nervous system activated. An activated nervous system doesn't think clearly. It reacts. And reaction is easy to control. Some people don't want to dominate others. They want to be needed. But need can be manipulated too. By positioning yourself as the only source of validation, the only listener, the only one who understands. Isolation strengthens control. When outside perspectives disappear, internal distortion grows. This is how cults form, how toxic relationships trap people, how loyalty overrides logic. The darker reality is this: the mind bonds strongest under stress. Pain accelerates attachment. When someone causes distress and then relieves it, the bond deepens. The brain confuses relief with love. This is not romance. It is conditioning. Another uncomfortable truth: people respect boundaries they believe will be enforced. They ignore boundaries they believe are flexible. Boundaries without consequences are suggestions. Dark psychology observes behavior, not words. People test limits unconsciously. They push slightly, then further again. Each time nothing happens, the mind updates its model. This is allowed. Disrespect is rarely sudden. It is gradual permission. The darkest realization is this: people treat you how they believe you will tolerate, not how you deserve, not how you request, how you allow. The mind does not operate on fairness. It operates on feedback. Another shadow mechanism: projection. People accuse others of what they cannot accept in themselves. The liar suspects dishonesty. The manipulator sees manipulation everywhere. The insecure perceive judgment constantly. Projection protects identity. It redirects discomfort outward. This is why some people attack traits they secretly fear within themselves. It's easier to condemn externally than confront internally. Dark psychology doesn't mean you become paranoid. It means you stop being naive. You learn that intentions don't matter as much as impact. That patterns reveal more than promises. That consistency matters more than words. The most dangerous people are not aggressive. They are calm, articulate, and emotionally detached. They don't lose control. They calculate. They don't explode. They erode. They drain confidence slowly. Shift blame subtly. Rewrite history gently until you don't recognize yourself anymore. The darkest moment in psychological manipulation is not pain, it's confusion. When you no longer trust your judgment, when you feel guilty without knowing why, when you explain your feelings repeatedly and still feel misunderstood. That's when power has shifted. Dark psychology teaches a brutal lesson. You cannot change people by understanding them. Understanding protects you. It does not fix them. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Awareness without action becomes paralysis. The mind respects clarity. When you see patterns, you must respond to patterns. Not excuses. Not potential. Not hope. The moment you stop needing validation from those who benefit from your doubt, control dissolves. The darkest truth is not that people manipulate. It's that most people participate in their own manipulation. Because facing reality means facing loss. Loss of illusion, loss of attachment, loss of identity. But clarity costs less than confusion. And peace costs less than permission. Once you understand the darker side of the human mind, you stop asking why people behave the way they do. You start deciding what behavior you will accept. And that is where real power begins. I hope you learned a lot about dark psychology. I'm happy you know better now. You understand signs now. You can outsmart any system at this point. Follow me for interesting stories like this as I build you into a powerful being.